study project analyzed was derived from an initial question of how to approach historic preservation through an original avenue that produces an original result, to be layered on top of an already existing design structure in order to augment that building's existing design. A case study that seemed appropriate to answer this question is the 7th Regiment Armory in New York City's Lenox Hill neighborhood, which was designed and built in the 1880s by a plethora of big-name New York designers at the time. The historic project was picked up by Swiss architecture firm Herzog and de Meuron, who wanted to demonstrate a fresh approach to historic preservation and its prevalence to architectural discourse. The case study was viewed through the lens of a discourse that was manifested via an interview by journalist Gerhard Mack, given to HDM partners Jacques Herzog and Oskin Mergenthaler about the importance of this project in the larger context of historic preservation in the United States. The first portion of conversation brought about the idea of HDM taking an approach that was rather different than how they usually approach projects containing historic artifacts, which entails adding a bold contemporary element that starkly contrasts the existing historic substance. The client pushed against this approach, and instead Herzog and de Meuron were tasked with finding a new contemporary program for the space by working with the historic material that is already there. Herzog and de Meuron are not strangers to this design method, as they have already approached the Tate Gallery in London in such a way. The old turbine hall of the Tate refinery was repurposed into a large high-ceiling atrium space, and the oil tanks in the basement were repurposed into exhibition spaces. This approach would lead to a unique solution in the armory as well. This again contrasts the approach that HDM later provided in addition to the Tate Modern, which inserted a dramatic intervention with the contemporary massing of the form that quite clearly demonstrated the new technology that was used to derive a new result. Another and unique idea that was brought to light through the interview was the concept of combining diverse preservation methods. This was done in order to essentially de-layer the history of finish layers on the interior of the project in specific rooms in order to restore the interiors of certain rooms to their intended glory back in the 1880s. Additionally, the rooms also had their own unique identities, and in order to restore them properly, the architectural design demanded the freedom to use the preservation methods that were necessary. These identities can be understood when looking at the different types of rooms in the armory and the unique styles that each brought to the table, which were designed by various individuals at the building's conception. As can be seen, the finishes, furniture, and light fixtures were all different, which corresponded to the architectural style that the different designers adhered to. One grand question at this point of the game is how any coherent sense of a finished design product emerges from such a large overlap and mixture of design preservation methods. The answer was that Herzog and de Meuron used a specific three-step procedure. That method was to first de-layer the existing surfaces to the room's original state, then visually and physically stabilize the room to a comprehensive state, after which contemporary methods would be used to reinforce and refurbish the room in such a way that the room retains its original character as interpreted by the designer. This is an image that was taken in the Company D room, where preservationists worked on the three-step process. All three elements are visible here, since some elements were painted back into their place in order to return the room back to its original 1880s state. This case study raises a series of questions that can be applied to the proposed project that will be worked on. One is questioning the way in which historic preservation can be an act of original and creative design, which is seen through HDM's designs for the Tate Modern in London and the Armory. Another would be how different methods can be used to arrive at a form of prototyping for historic architectural elements to be used in such a way, and to be used in a new way as well. Moving on to presentation 2, the initial task again being to work with the historic substance. The research method that was analyzed and used as the research method for application to a new design approach was HDM's 3-step method for delayering, stabilizing, and refurbishing. The area of focus for the project was to hone in on a specific room of the Armory to fully comprehend the 3-step process. The company D room was selected, designed in the 1880s in the Renaissance revival style by Potier and Stymus. Diverse methods were implemented around the room, as Herzog and Dumouriez first mentioned. The paint layers on the interior walls were delayered, then stabilized by repainting the heavily damaged areas to the original finished floor. Some areas were left empty, such as on the ceiling, as can be seen here, so that the user of the space may perceive it and understand that this ceiling is a weathered piece of history, which is being added onto by contemporary means, but not being completely cleaned off and rebuilt. Certain elements were reinforced, including the lighting, which added multiple types of lighting to the fixtures to allow for a flexibility of lighting uses depending on the activity that the space is being used for. All of the steps of the process led to a contemporary preservation of the Company D room, creating a coherent aesthetic by preserving the old layers of the building while adding minimal contemporary architectural interventions to allow for new uses and flexibilities for the repurposed space. The architectural conclusion drawn here is that ultimately all of the processes of preservation lead to a coherently designed interior space that can be used for a diverse flexibility of activities, from lectures to conferences, even to dance recitals and performances. This can all be achieved through a series of minimal architectural interventions, including the flexibility of lighting effects such as downlighting, ambient lighting, and spotlighting, as can be viewed here. On a more local note, this case study lesson and the research method involved was used towards another potential project that is here in Detroit. The Book Tower, designed by Louis Camper in 1926, has dense historic information that can be delayered in order to understand it and be preserved to an entirely new use, much like the Armory in New York. The comprehension of the diverse layers of change, from the historic effects to recent changes, can be reviewed and be repurposed towards a new use for the building to increase community value. Such designs and modifications include the damages that were taken on the exterior facade and their alterations, such as the replacement of damaged limestone elements with cast fiber reinforced plastic elements. Additionally, lessons can be taken from how the ceiling was treated in the Armory and stabilized in order to create a comprehensive, coherent layer. From here, contemporary changes can be made to both the interior and exterior in order to increase property value as well as repurpose the interior for flexibility of uses. In Presentation 3, contextual elements were reviewed in order to make sense of the value of the architectural intervention to the community and what it means moving forward. The three contextual elements analyzed in the armory were program, which was interpreted in comparison to the community's surrounding programmatic elements, building age, which were reviewed in order to get a sense of the layers of potential history that can be revealed in comparison to the surrounding built environment, and historic preservation landmarks, which were reviewed in order to understand the prevalence of the armory's importance or unimportance to the larger community encompassing it. When reviewing contextual programmatic spaces, it became clear that the armory was a single cultural space that was in its immediate context, signaling its importance as a cultural public hub for people to meet and share ideas. In terms of building age, it appeared that the armory was one of the oldest of the surrounding buildings, indicating that it was most rich in history when compared to surrounding structures. This gives it importance on a contextual scale, since many see older buildings as having more value in addition to the programmatic type over time. When looking at landmarks, the armory had been designated as a unique mark in 1966. When comparing it to other landmarks, which are restricting in their use towards the public, the armory shows itself as the most important to a space that is available for larger public discourse. The book tower's context was then reviewed to be understood through the same methodology that the armory is. In terms of programmatic spaces, the one thing that the area is missing is a cultural hub, or even a public meeting space. The implementation of a public atrium, museum, and cultural space can allow the community to flourish and bring people to the local areas. The book tower, being one of the oldest built forms on site, provides a rich history that is prevalent for cultural programmatic intervention to be placed inside and outside of the building. Currently, there are no specific buildings on the National Registry of Historic Landmarks in the area. However, the larger Washington Boulevard district is. With the designation of a landmark, more interest could come to the area and allow for the book tower to become an eventual cultural landmark for the community to appreciate. If presented properly, the book tower could lead to a local cultural sustainability and bring people to public spaces in and around the building. This would demonstrate the power of historic preservation to help the overarching community and increase cultural awareness.